Chakravarti, the moderator for today's interactive session organized by Law Internships. Law internships provide internship opportunities in the field of law primarily to the students pursuing undergraduate or postgraduate programs. Advocate Amrita Jain Ma'am, the partner at Law Internships, along with her team of young, dynamic, and competent members, assisting in providing opportunities for gaining professional experience as well as improving legal skills while being enrolled in a full-time law program. The objective is to prepare students for the real world by imparting practical exposure and relevant skills through legal internships. So today we have amongst us Mr. Tushar Well, sir. Welcome you, sir. Thank you for joining us. Sir is a graduate from School of Law, University of Petroleum and Energy Studies, Dehradun. Currently, sir is working as a legal consultant at the Supreme Court Committee on Road Safety, Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, and also assisting Justice Abhay Manohar Sapre as his research associate. In the year 2019, Sir was felicitated for his excellence in the mooting as well as extracurricular activities by Senior Advocate Dr. Adish Agarwal, President of International Council of Jurists, London. During law school, Sir represented his university in several international as well as national moot court competitions, such as NLSIU Trilegal International Arbitration Moot, FDI International Moot, and the DSNLU CCI National Moot as a part of the Best Oralist team. Sir also won the runners-up trophy at the Best Team Coordination Award in the National Law University Delhi International Insolvency and Bankruptcy Moot. And he has also received runners-up trophy, Best Memorial Award, and the second Best Advocate Award in the Surana and RGNUL International Law Moot Court competition. Sir has been regularly mentoring teams for various national and international moot court competition as well as ADR competitions. And he has been judging several moots, the most recent being the FDI International Moot Court Competition 2020. We welcome you, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Gautami, and it's a pleasure to be here. And I really thank Law Internships for this brilliant opportunity to me. It was a pleasure drafting this year's moot proposition as well. And I'm really pleased to attend all the attendees here. And I really thank all of you to join this session for this mooting workshop. So if there's no any further ado, I can start the workshop. Gautami?
Yes, sir. Without dealing any further, let's begin the session for today. Over to you, sir.
All right. So I'll make the session as precise as possible today. And considering that there are two agendas of this workshop, Anant will be dealing with the first 3 points as mentioned earlier, and I will be addressing the oral pleadings and how you can, the basic tips of oral advocacy as well as the advanced advocacy. So I'll be demonstrating what should be the mannerisms and how you should tackle the judges, how you can present your arguments and do them successfully. So I've divided this entire structure into two halves. First would be the basic oral advocacy and the second would be the advanced oral advocacy. I'll just start with the basic advocacy part. But before that, it should be really understood by all of you that when you are presenting in a moot court competition as the oralist, you need to divide this structure into 3 parts. Firstly, it calls for an introduction wherein you need to tell the judges what are you going to argue. This is known as the case theory. Understand all these three things are very important once you have done submitting your memorials and once you are approaching a moot court competition. These 3 things, again, I would mention them. First would be the introduction part, which is known as the case theory part. You tell them what you're going to argue. For instance, you jump onto the podium, and for online moot court competitions, you cannot do anything as such. But once you address the judges and once you're about to start the moot, before you start the oral arguments and before you jump down to the facts of the case and the jurisdiction right there, you need to actually tell them what you're going to argue. So for instance, if you are representing the prosecution, if you're representing the defense, you're going to tell them that, yes, I'm representing the defense here. The brief factual matrix of the case is here. And this is what I'm going to argue today. These are my 2 crucial points. Secondly, it calls for the submissions. Submissions are the basic contentions which you include in your issues and your submissions, and you argue upon them using case laws and the legal scenario. The third is the closing. You need to summarize what you argued in the rebuttals and the sur-rebuttals as well, because what you need to understand is that once you are done with the introduction part, it is very essential that you need to actually summarize everything before you say the prayer. So you need to actually summarize that, yes, these were my contentions. This was the point of law. This has been substantiated by me. And further on, this is my prayer. I'll just start with the basic oral advocacy now. And with regard to that, I'll just jump straight to the court etiquettes and mannerism, the basic advocacy skills. And what I'll try to include is that these days, this is a trend of virtual moot court competitions. So my suggestions and my, the approach I introduced to you would also include the basic techniques and the advanced techniques to cater to the online moot court competitions. So essentially the language of the courtroom, as you all know, is different from what is used in everyday life, and you should try and formulate phrases as you might expect a judge to say them. Colloquial phrases such as okay and all right are not acceptable. These are basic SMS languages which are not really acceptable to judges. If a judge corrects your mistaken interpretation of a case, for instance, the correct response would be something like, I'm grateful to your lordship's assistance, rather than just okay and all right. Because you need to show some respect to the judges, because in the end, it is about speaking slowly, and it often allows you to think of what might be actually appropriate to say rather than how you might ordinarily respond to a person or a friend, for instance. Thanking is always a good idea in moot court competitions on every point, because this is not usual court. You know, you need to act with proper mannerism. In usual courts, you do not actually thank every time to judges, but in the moot court competitions, thanking is always a good idea, even if you would rather, throttle them, because in the end, it is professional to ask the judges permission at various stages of the speech. For instance, with your lordship's permission, I would like to move on to the statement of jurisdiction, and when the judges allow you, you need to say thanks. Apart from that, you should never tell the judge what you think, suppose, or suggest. By this, I mean you shouldn't use personal pronouns. You shouldn't uh, explain your belief or maybe your thinking skills. You need to be very clear, and you must submit humbly that the judge should adopt your interpretation of the authorities given. For instance, if you just argue, I believe that the prosecution has failed to demonstrate the facts correctly in the case, this is not correct, because actually you are thinking or you are putting down your belief, which is really not what the judges want you to do. Know what court you are in, therefore what you want to address, because in national and international moot court competitions, what essentially happens is that the participants really get confused as to whether it's an international moot court competition or a national moot court competition. In international moots, you generally refer to the lords as your excellencies, but in national moot court competitions, it entirely based on your causes. With regard to that, you need to also understand how to give the full citation of your cases, because in the end, if you are referring to a case n number of times, that is fine. But in the end, if you are also suggesting some other cases, you need to actually say the full citation of the case. This ensures that your research is very prompt. Or for instance, in online moot court competitions, what people are doing is that they're sharing their screens and demonstrating that they actually have a compendium. Demonstrating and sharing a screen while using a compendium shows that you have actually researched despite being a online moot court competition. Apart from that, what are the etiquette and styles? So all the times judges have to be referred to as your lordship, your excellency, as I already said. With regard to the approach of your oral arguments as a conversation, it shouldn't be a rote learned speech, as I would suggest, because often it happens that participants tend to rote learn a speech and they formulate a speech. By all means, I would suggest you not to make a speech. It entirely depends on the pleaders right there. If someone is really comfortable with adopting a 20-page speech, that is fine. If they do not want to include a speech, I have a separate addressal to make on the speech part, where I will explain how to use a mind map and skeletal arguments. This summarizes your arguments very properly. Be aware, very important, that during the time of the arguments, the judges can and always interrupt you with questions. That is very certain and very reasonable. It is vital that you actually fully answer the question to the best of your ability when the judges ask for it. In online moot court competitions, what I have been personally witnessing is that the participants tend to actually switch off their videos. Sometimes they switch off their audios due to the net connectivity. There are issues where the participants say that I'll answer this question in the end. However, do note that if there is a good judge here who is experienced in mooting as well as judging moot court competitions, or for instance, who is not, they will make a due note of it. And in the end, what they will do is, already, if you don't really answer their questions because they are not convinced. All right. When it's very pertinent to know that the advanced oral advocacy skills come after the picture when you are actually done with the basic advocacy skills. So we are actually through with the basic oral advocacy skills right here. If there are any questions on the basic oral advocacy skills, you can address them in the Q&A box. With regard to the advanced oral advocacy skills, which is the really important part here in the picture, whatever the first point which I would like to highlight is the brief outline of your argument. Once you are approaching a moot court competition, and once you are actually doing is telling down your arguments and submitting to the judges, you should outline those arguments on a single sheet of paper. By this I mean is that if for a pleader there is a speech and then there is a mind map, there is a difference between the two. A mind map is basically a single sheet of paper where you actually put down your three best points or maybe four best points that you actually argue a case upon. In the end, what happens is that when you when a judge asks you a question, for example, the judges are taking you from point A to D and you are arguing a point A only. What happens is that once you have a rote learned speech, you tend to forget where the actual argument is if you are kind of referring to the speeches. A mind map actually helps you to jot down those 4 points from A to D and the subsequent authorities and the case laws which need to be there to substantiate your argument. Outline this on a single sheet of paper. For instance, in the present case, there are two issues to be dealt with, and both of these issues are very pertinent. In those issues, there are many sub-issues present in the present problem. So what you need to do is you need to actually put down these arguments as argument A and argument B. These are the two issues. A point A calls for the sub-issue of the first argument, and this is how you need to outline all of these on a sheet of paper. With regard to the authorities that need to be cited, you need to actually jot down all of the authorities, the most pertinent authorities on that single sheet of paper, along with the along with the arguments there. This ensures that there is no actually excessive words on your argument. You can actually refer to your mind map once in a time when you actually tend to forget something, because oral arguments in the end are supposed to be more of a conversation with the judge, and it's not actually it's basically the interchange of ideas in a moot court competition between you and the judges. This means that you need to actually maintain as much eye contact as possible, as well as remain totally flexible so that you can engage in a dialogue with your panel. If you want, you can write your introduction as a a bit of a security blanket, and you can also write on the conclusion, as I already said. So what you can do is you can in the mind map itself, you can jot down a 2-minute introduction on the judges and the conclusion part of the summarization of your arguments. This will ensure that if you have time in the end, if you don't have time in the end, you can actually sum up those issues. For instance, in online moot court competitions, what I have been witnessing is that in two or the other issues, when there are many issues in a moot proposition and there are too many points to be dealt with, like in the present proposition, even though there are two issues present in the proposition, subsequently there are many sub-issues and many technical points to be dealt with. The problem seems very easy in its approach, but there are too many loopholes in the problem, as it is very much evident. So what you need to do is, it is highly possible that during the preliminary rounds and during even the final rounds, it is possible that you only get to argue one issue. It is possible. And what you can do is that you can prepare a summary of the issue too here. That does not mean that it's gonna happen this time, but yeah, it can happen. So you need to be actually flexible with that and prepare a mind map, as I already suggested. So when I come to preparing for your oral arguments, what is the best way to prepare for the oral arguments? You need to be actually comfortable with the facts of the case. The problem is not very long in the present moot court competition, and it's a very precise proposition. So you need to be comfortable with each and every paragraph, each and every dates as it is mentioned, because since it's a criminal law moot, you need to be aware about the chain of the events there in the moot proposition. You need to be able to articulate the standard of review applicable to the questions presented. By this, I mean is that you need to understand that the case before the present scenario is before the Allahabad High Court. So the Allahabad High Court's latitude with respect to each issue as to how would a High Court approach the already dealt with the issues by the trial court. In regard to that, you need to anticipate the jurisdictional questions and how the court's procedural options for resolving the case at the present hands. So read those cases where there have been appeals from the trial court and how the High Court has actually appreciated or maybe actually dealt with the way how the trial court has approached the situation at hand and the case at hand. Think about in the present moot court competition, think about the limiting principles that can prevent the unintended consequences of ruling in your favor. By this, I mean that the judges will ask likely questions about the impact of the requested relief on the hypothetical future perspective. Because in the end, what we can see is that the case before the Allahabad High Court talks about many instances such as the faulty investigation and every other thing. So the judges will likely ask you questions about the impact of your requested relief. That is the prayer. So you need to be very thorough with what you actually argue in the present case, and you should assure that the concerns about all the judges are answered there. You need to backstop your argument so that when it becomes apparent that a judge disagrees with your proposition about one single point, you can clearly say that even if the court doesn't accept this premise, this should still prevail, or some other narrower ground. Try to put yourself in the place of the judges and think about what the questions they would ask and work on short, clear, and accurate answers to all of them. This is a very old strategy that we actually use, but this is still the most useful strategy because you need to actually anticipate and think about what the judges would ask you in the moot court competition, especially in moot court, online moot court competitions where you don't have actual amount of time to actually think, and the judges are actually there staring you at the screens. So coming down to the point that what does a successful oral advocate's outline look like? By outline, I mean that the outline of the speech. The outline of the speech, as I already mentioned, it should be very short and precise, and there should be a few keywords on different points and maybe a phrase you want to repeat at the theme of the case. Because in criminal law moots, what we actually get to know is that there are certain assumptions on the part of the trial court, and there are certain repetition of the facts there. You need to be actually clear with all of them, and you do not have to repeat what you actually told the judges way before. The speech, if you are actually making a speech, it shouldn't be more than 2 to 3 pages, because in the end you need to actually argue the most precise options available and the annotation of points at least there. You won't be able to read your notes, for instance, because in the online moot court competitions, you really need to maintain some eye contact there with the audience, with the judges, with everyone there, as well as the two fellow pleaders who are looking at you from the other side of the table. So you won't be able to read your notes. So include only a few trigger words. Ideally, you should know that your case laws very well so that you can cite them with proper authorities. The question pops up in this case as to how should we actually memorize the arguments, because sometimes it happens that yes, people can forget their arguments, and what you should understand is that you should absolutely memorize the introduction as well as the conclusion so that you can make eye contact with the court. Now what this happens is that if your starting is really good and if your ending is really good, the middle part where you are actually submitting your arguments and maybe sometimes referring to your points does not lose your marks. Because in the end, if you are giving a planned introduction, a very crisp introduction that you actually memorize by maintaining eye contact, you are very well going to do there. Be aware of the questions as you will be likely be asked, as I already said, and then you can actually memorize the answers as well. So in that case, if there is a question which is likely to be popped up, you can actually answer them. But you need to be very precise of this. But you need to be very sure of this fact that once the judges ask you a question, you should not interrupt them. You should actually listen to the questions very well, think patiently, take a pause, and then answer, because this shows politeness on your part. Another question which pops up is that what is the most effective way to use the cases or the provided material as the present proposition do you have? My suggestion would be to cite the names of the cases only if the legal rule is disputed and you're trying to convince the court that your version of the rule is the right one. For instance, because if the defense is pleading in this present case, you need to be actually sure that the legal rules and the philosophy behind that case law that you are citing is actually not disputed there. Know that the record is very well, because you should be aware of the facts of the case. Again, I'm reiterating this point because the dates are there, there are many loopholes in the proposition, and you need to be prepared with every possible question about the facts as well, because during the preliminary rounds it is very much certain that the questions will likely revolve around the facts of the case as well and the trial court's findings. Remember that you need to be thorough with the fact that if you are you are committing a mistake, or maybe you've actually cited a wrong case of, or if you have by mistake you've actually pleaded a point which is in favor of the petitioner here, don't freak out, because if it is an important point, take a deep breath, clarify to the judges what went wrong, and walk it back if possible, and if you have time, because it is very essential to clarify what you said. And don't let the judges see you flustered, because in the online moot court competitions the attention span is very good here, because we are seeing you at a distance from a very close end, and all the facial expressions, the eye contact, and all your body movements are clearly visible and notable to all of us. The question pops up as to how can you conclude your submissions. The conclusion should be very short and powerful. You should not draw out any theatrics, because in the very instance, in one sentence, tell the court what you want it to do and why it should do it. By this I mean that if once you are concluding it before the prayer, you need to actually state the reasons for what you actually argued and why it is important for the client at the present hand. If there is a faulty investigation and it actually amounts to negligence, and in the present case, you need to actually answer them that yes, this was a fact, and yes, my client is this act calls for a simple negligence and there was a mere celebratory firing. If you are arguing from the defense case, you can actually point down that yes, in the in the cross examinations, it had been pointed out that the gun was pointed at the gun was actually pointed, and it was not actually a celebratory wedding. There, celebratory firing. There had been previous instances where both of them had been fighting over a girl there. So you need to be clear with the reasoning as to actually what you want and actually how you want, and often conclude accordingly. Ending shortly before your time expires leaves a great impression, although it is very difficult to actually end before your time lapses. But if you conclude way before your time, or maybe just 1 or 2 minutes before your time, it poses a really great impression. Another question pops up, that how do you make the best of a rebuttal? So once you are addressing the sir rebuttals, don't respond to all of your opponent's points. Just hit the biggest one or two on which the argument rests, because often I see that participants actually just start arguing again in the rebuttals. And what you need to understand is that even if you say just one point in the sir rebuttal, it is totally fine. This goes for the rebuttals as well. If you just say one point, it is totally fine. If it is on the point, we will get to know about it. Now I'll just come down to what the speech and the mind map should actually constitute of. As I've already reiterated, the mind map calls for a greater amount of flexibility, but what you need to ensure in a mind map is the roadmap of the actual case. By roadmap, I mean that after you are done introducing yourself and your co-counsel, before making any further argument, you need to identify actually 2 to 3, not more than 3 issues that you're going to discuss in the case, and make these issues very clear and straightforward. For example, this should not this court should find in favor of the appellants for 2 reasons. You should then list your main arguments that these are the 2 issues. Firstly, because this court does not have jurisdiction in the present case, and secondly, because customary international law is applicable in the present case. These are the 2 points that you need to actually cater to them. This is a fictional suggestion. It is not based on the actual moot proposition today. If you think of actually organizing your oral arguments in an outline form, as I've suggested, using a mind map, 2 or 3 reasons contained within your roadmap should be the highest levels of the outline. By this, I mean is that just like you prepare the summary of your arguments in a moot court memorial, what you can do is once you are done jotting those 3 issues which you're going to argue in the mind map, you can actually write down a summary in case you think that you can forget. Also, do note that when you include a mind map, you should also include the para numbers that you wish to cite, because this ensures that you're not actually referring to the moot proposition again or your personal notes. On a simple sheet of paper, you know where you are arguing from, you know what's the page number, you know what's the para number, as well as the case citations. In the mind map actually consists how you can make a mind map. You can make a mind map using clouds. You can also ensure that circles are there on a sheet of paper, each with one point of argument, just like we used to do and used to make flow charts in class 7th or class 8th. That this is a really creative technique because it personally helped me, because it's all about the new age that we are arguing in. And totally, if there are any, I've seen also mooters doing that. They use sticky notes. Some of them also use glitter pens and highlighters, which is really good, and it shows that yes, you are also very engrossed in that proposition. And about the skeletal arguments. Skeletal arguments are something that you draft while researching. It is also always useful to maintain a document where you actually collect all the information that you think must go in your memorial. This is the memorial making stage when you draft some skeletal arguments and see that, yes, this is the point of law and these are the essential facts and these are the arguments which can be actually incorporated. When you include those skeletal arguments in a mind map, this ensures that, for instance, if you are actually missing out some point in your main arguments, and for example, the judges ask you that very pertinent point, you already have those skeletal arguments in your picture. So essentially, you can carry two sheets of paper in moot court competitions. The one would be the draft skeletal arguments, where you actually have some more arguments and some more cases substantiating those arguments, and the mind map, which actually includes just the 2 or 3 points that you're going to argue in that entire case. It is very essential that you actually memorize your entire roadmap and the mind map and the skeletal arguments, because it is really easy to actually memorize the roadmap than a 20-page speech. In the mind map, you need to actually create a unifying theme. By all means, I mean that you need to choose a central theme to focus on the strength of your arguments. This theme should revolve around your central arguments. For instance, in the present moot court proposition, there are two issues, and the second issue actually talks about the presence of poppy there, the 20 cages poppy there. So the central theme revolves around the fact that yes, the Jeep was unnamed there. There was no actual number. It was an unregistered vehicle. The 20 kg poppy was found there, and subsequently, this is my case involved. From the side of the defense, there is a faulty investigation. There was no civil witnesses that had been approached on the spot. There was no individual inspector who came for the purpose of investigating for that narcotics case. So this is the actual central theme revolving around your second issue. You need to revolve around this only and the tone of your oral argument, and you'll want to return to it as you answer the judges' questions, because in the end, if the judges are taking you again to the question of celebratory firing, you need to actually reiterate back to that question and revolve around your theme if you are the second counsel and arguing only on this issue too. Practice. This is a very, very, very old and very old saying that you need to actually argue you need to actually argue before a friend or maybe your parents. Right now, you can do that. You can do it purposely, because what the essence of practice is that you need to actually convince a layman. By this, I mean, once I used to prepare for moot court competitions, I used to call upon a friend who was not even aware about the law. For instance, I never used to call my moot court team, or I had dealt with my moot court teams and I used to practice with my moot court team. But once I was preparing my speeches alone and once I was preparing my mind maps alone, I used to call upon a friend who wasn't aware about the entire law there. So by this, I mean, if you can convince a layman by your arguments, you can convince a judge. Because if you can convince a layman by your central theme and the arguments and your reasoning, you can actually support your reasoning there, and there's just a minor difference between conversing with a judge and a layman. You just have to ensure that there are some mannerisms there. You need to ensure that there are some case laws there to be cited, and ensure that yes, there is some formality. Other than that, you need to actually convince a judge. Both are laymen there. In the end, both are people who one is aware about the law, the other one is unaware about the law. So you need to practice again and again, practice with many people as possible. If not right now, you can practice in front of a mirror. This calls that you are actually, if you're standing in front of the mirror, you can actually maintain eye contact. You can ensure that you are not reading. You can ensure that your facial expressions do not change. This is one of the key areas that you can work on and practice in front of the mirror. What is the best thing that an advocate can do? This is my, I'm just concluding one of my very tips as to what are the best things that an oral advocate can do. You need to be confident in your approach, because even the greatest of the advocates aren't perfect, and even the greatest of the mooters aren't perfect. And not every case is a winner. For instance, there are many loopholes in this present proposition, but it is your duty to actually convince the judge, even if the judges have this opinion that yes, this case is a bit tilting in some of the other, in the prosecution's favor or the defense's favor. But in the end, you need to understand that if you present your arguments with the best assurance and your speaking is clear, confident, and a forthright tone, makes all the difference in the end. Be prepared for all levels of knowledge in a judge, because it is highly possible that the judges you get in the preliminary rounds are of greatest knowledge in criminal law, because you never really know in advance if you have a judge who has glanced at a bench brief or a judge who spent a 30-year career practicing in criminal law. Learn to read the judge's comfort level with the material. This leads me to the fact that how do you tackle judges? The judges, are of two types in moot court competitions, as many of you must have seen. One is the hot bench, the other one is a comfort bench. Both the benches are very different, but both the benches are very accurate when they mark you. You need to understand that how the judge wants to present your argument, because the judges are actually taking you forward to a point of law that they want a discussion on. The judges are actually asking you questions to lead you to the very point that they want you to be in. So understand what the judge actually wants, understand the facial expressions of the judges, because if the judges have this ability to look at you and observe you, even you can see the judges very properly in a moot court competition, especially in the online moots. You can actually get to know if the judges are actually in a comfort level, if the judges are very fidgety. If you understand them, you can actually tackle them very well. Because if you tackle these judges' expressions, and if you can understand what they actually want, you can adjust your arguments accordingly and the complexity of your argument accordingly. Persuasion, as they always say in moot court competitions, is very essential, but persuasion isn't always the art of having the most details. Believe me, it's about knowing your audience and tailoring your message. Persuasion is about what you actually have and actually what you speak. If it is just a one argument and one case law, you can do it all. It's about knowing your audience again and tailoring your message. So you need to essentially lead with the strongest point rather than building up to it. By this I mean that if you if you are arguing on the issue that there was no proper search and seizure in the NDPS Act, you need to be actually make sure that you have a strong outline of that problem, of that issue, the actual factual matrix surrounding that issue, the law involved, the provisions involved, and ready with two landmark cases. Because if you are slightly interrupted in between, it actually changes the tone of your argument. In the end, you do not have to build up to your arguments. For example, you do not have to actually specify the essentials there. You need to come down straight to the fact that yes, there was poppy there. It was searched by the police officer. This is the investigation that is there, and this is my case. You do not actually have to build it bit by bit that this is the provision. The provision calls for carrying or actually growing poppy, and this is how you have to do it. This is a longer route. You shouldn't have to take it. Lead with your strongest point there. Once again, be able to steer the conversation by smoothly transitioning between questions and arguments. What I mean is that you do not doing so, it always creates a convincing yet conversational style that actually puts the judges at ease, because wherever possible, if you weave into your argument an idea that you are not only correct on the law, but you are also seeking just result. In the end, what I mean is that if you are arguing on the fact that yes, these are my law points, and if the judges interrupt you during your arguments, you are reiterating back to your position that your lordship, despite this, I agree with you, but however the factual matrix presents, so this is the point of law and this is the actual situation, these are the precedents, and this is the point of law which needs to be reiterated. You need to be focused on your legal analysis, and the judges are actually attuned to fairness considerations that can be persuaded by them in a close case. For instance, in this very case, this is a very close case, but it went to the High Court for simply because the trial court's findings were not appropriate. So in this case, being a closed case, it got opened, and the very fact is that you need to reiterate the fact that yes, the findings of the trial court were not proper, but in the end, the trial court's finding was also based on the chain of events, which actually lead down to this. It's all about your convincing arguments there. Once you are asked a question, you should answer it very directly with proper precision, because if you are just beating around the bush, that loses you certain brownie points. When possible, just start with yes, your lordship, this is it, and protect your client's position in the end. Because in the end, if you are certainly reiterating the point of law involved, for instance, in the present case, it was argued by the defense that yes, this is a case of negligence. But in the end, you need to also protect your client's position that yes, even if this is a case of negligence, my client should be acquitted. Because yes, there are instances, there are loopholes there is the factual case matrix, the witnesses have said the otherwise. In the end, you need to be ensured, because you could also get judges who are actually practicing advocates. They actually ensure that you are actually preserving the client's position there. So you can and you may, but you should immediately follow the eyes with or no that qualification there. This leads me to the very last point of this discussion as to what are the biggest mistakes oral advocates can make in moot court competitions. First is showing nerves. Second is being too formal. Even at the highest levels of appellate advocacy, the Supreme Court, or maybe in international moots such as the ICJ, an oral argument is closer to a conversation than an oration. As I already said, that you need to be in a conversation with the judges. Even in international arbitration moots, it's more of a conversation. It's not a rote learned speech and you just get away. It's not trying to get away, but it's actually being too formal is also too bad here. What people do is that they start to give an answer before thinking about what to say. This happens when you don't actually prepare the questions well in advance, and advocates often do rush in answering a question, because this happens and this happens usually in online moods as well, that fearing 2 seconds of silence in an online mood and then floundering or actually reversing course, they reformat their answers on the fly. So if the judge is already on the point and is listening to your answers already, he will know that you are actually beating around the bush and you are actually differing from your position. So just think about the question, pause for a second. The judges really appreciate it, and you can answer them all very good in that manner. The most serious error in oral arguments that counsels do is not listening carefully to the questions, and you need to be actually sure about what the judges actually want from you. The last point is that making a concession. By concession, it means that one is almost never necessary in an argument, that you should always be able to defend your ground at all levels. In a moot proposition, there are many loopholes present, and if you make a concession there, or one is almost always never necessary, it might be possible that the case is not tilted in your favor. But you shouldn't show nerves there, and you shouldn't be actually very emotional about the fact that the case is not entirely in your favor and argue on that line. This shows that you are not a really good counsel. You have not researched well. You do not know how to protect your client's interests, and you cannot actually argue properly on the facts of the case as well as the law stated, because there are cases in favor of and there are cases against. In the present case, the case is balanced and it is totally based on how you converse, how you convince and what is the flow of your arguments. Of course, a lot of all what I said in this present session will be a bit more subjective, but it is based on my specific experiences in previous moot court competitions. So I would advise a common sense approach when you adopt in this moot court competition as well as the upcoming moot court competitions to adapting actually what I suggested today. So in order to suit your own style, because in the end, my style as a whole was to use a mind map and not a 20-page speech. But my moot court teammate, my co-counsel, always in every manner, he carried a 30-page speech. He was very comfortable with that, but I was just comfortable with a one-pager. It entirely depends on you. So it should suit your own style. I'm not saying that the speeches are wrong, but the carrying speeches could actually lose you a bit amount of time, especially in online moots. So be aware of that. It is also important to take into account that any nuances you can attribute to a particular judge or a mooting situation, you need to be aware of all of them, because if you can attribute to a particular judge, you actually win a case. If you can attribute what the judges actually want, you can actually convince them. It is always good to smile in moot court competitions, especially in online moots where your body language is very visible there. You are actually not, if you are smiling there, it's a really good thing. Many judges have completely opposing opinions on the same subject. So you need to be able to read how a judge is responding and adapt your approach accordingly. The final tips in online moot court competitions would be to dress accordingly, because recently, just last week in a moot court competition, I saw that a guy was not wearing even a tie. A guy was wearing a tie, but his top buttons were opened. This is just my approach, because I actually see how you are approaching a moot court competition despite sitting at your place. Because in the end, even if your top button is open, I can notice it. If you are not wearing a tie, I can notice it. If you're not wearing braces, I can notice it. If I'm asking you a question and you are switching off your video or switching off your audio, I can see that. If there is a net connectivity issue, I can also see that. So if you are faking a net connectivity issue, I am actually cutting down your marks. Be aware of all these things, maintain eye contact. It's really good to smile in moot court competitions and engage in a good conversation. And yes, all the best for this moot court competition and the further moot court competitions. It was a pleasure for me to address this audience here, and I raise the floor for questions if there are any.
All right, sir. So if anyone has any queries or questions, you can just raise your hand and we shall recognize you and unmute you. So anyone have any question? You just can raise your hand. Sir, I can see one question here. By Vishwas Pandey. Yes, he is asking what should be an average number of case laws to be quoted that can actually impress the judge?
Okay, good question, Vishwas. What you can do is, as I mentioned in your mind map, if you are taking a mind map, for every argument, just 2 case laws are very much okay, because the entire case can also be fought on just 1 case law. So if you have two cases for every argument that you're presenting, for every sub issues, I mean, you are very much okay with that. And it's not about actually impressing the judges with case laws. It is just substantiating your argument with the case laws. If your arguments are very prompt, despite not being any case law, if there are good judges, they would understand that yes, the argument is very logical and there is no need for a case law. For instance, I really adopt this approach while judging moot court competitions. If there are precedents, even I am aware of, I won't really reiterate that, please, I need a precedent there. Because if the argument is logical, even 1 case law could support it, or even no case laws. It entirely is based on what the judges require. But on a usual approach, you can carry 2 case laws per issue. This makes, if there are 2 issues in the present proposition, you can carry just 4 case laws, which are the primary case laws you want to actually address to.
Okay, thank you, sir. I hope, Vishwas, you are satisfied with the answer. Sir, there is another question. What suggestions do you have for the first-time mooters?
1 second, I have another question here. Okay, all right. I'll address this first. The first-time mooters, what you can do is that if you are done with the submissions, and if you are, I guess you are done with the moot court memorial submissions, right, Gautami?
Yes, sir. I hope they have submitted.
All right. So what you can do is read down your memorials once again, what you have actually argued, read down the facts of the case at least 5 times a day. This is a very short proposition and you can read the case entirely 5 times a day. I mean, before coming to the session, I just read it. Despite drafting the proposition, I was just reading it because it's very interesting to read moot propositions. So read the moot proposition again and again. Understand that there are loopholes there. Make a note of those loopholes, because in the end, if the judges are asking questions on your arguments, you need to make sure that yes, these are the loopholes. Carry these loopholes down. prepare speeches. For first-time mooters, it is very essential to prepare speeches and not mind maps. Good that you asked this question, because first-time mooters generally don't know how to use a mind map. And they are not really used to just reading down 4 lines and actually arguing for 20 minutes. Prepare a speech, prepare how you actually can list your issues. For adopting a very simple approach, what you can do is that read your memorial, understand what you argued. You can research further additionally, and you can incorporate some of the arguments that the senior counsels have actually argued in the cases you cited. By this, I mean that you have a structured line of arguments, because it is really essential to actually form a structure of arguments for first-time mooters. Jotted by point 1, this is the first issue. For the first issue has 4 sub-issues. These are my four sub-issues, and I substantiate with these facts of the case, which are present on these page numbers. These are the cases supporting those facts, and this is my settled proposition. For first-time mooters, even if you are referring to the speeches, it is very much okay. The judges don't really cut your marks in the end if you are actually referring to this. But if you are constantly is just for a second here, it's totally fine. If you're actually referring to your speeches also, it is very much okay. So my suggestion would be, for not just for the first timers, for the entire moot court participants, that share the screen, prepare a compendium. The compendium will already have those cases. You won't have to memorize those cases. The cases are already there. The citations are already there. You can always deal easily with the citations there. And when you share the screen, you'll have the citations on your screen already. You can deal with all these things and practice very, very much, because for first timers, showing nerves and getting scared is a very, it's a common affair. But in online moots, there is nothing to be scared about, because there are no actual judges sitting in front of you. So all the best.
All right, thank you, sir. So another question is that, sir, could you ask for an alternative prayer? What impression would it leave on the judges?
Can you repeat that?
Sir, could you ask for an alternative prayer? What impression would it leave on the judges?
For an alternative prayer?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't get that question. Can you come live, whoever is this? I need a
Yeah, just
clarification.
unmute yourself and then you can ask the question.
Okay, I guess he or she is not available. But what I understand from this, are you there? Is anyone there asking that question?
Yeah, Priyam has raised his
Yes,
hand.
sir. Hello, sir. Hello, sir.
Yes.
Hi, Priyam.
Sir, I would like to ask you that if we are not sure about the prayer and we are not confident that much about the case, so can we ask for an alternate prayer from the judges?
Priyam, what do you mean by alternative prayer?
Alternative prayer means what I need exactly is that I'm not that much confident about that I will get that relief from the judges. Like currently in the present case, for the current moot proposition I'm talking. So can we say that if you are not convinced for us to give this, then it would be suitable for you to give that also. Then also it will be good for our client.
Okay, I got it. Priyam, when I was addressing the fact that you need to be client-centric, it doesn't mean that you need to be actually emotional on your client's part. Whatever is there and whatever the case laws say, whatever arguments you have, based on that, you need to actually say down your prayer, because the judges are not really concerned about the prayer in moot court competitions. They don't even actually listen to the prayer sometimes. The prayers are always useless, according to me. That's why I suggested you guys to actually make a summary of the conclusion of your arguments, because if you conclude effectively, your prayer is just like a normal scenario there. If you actually conclude what you actually stated, this could actually solve your problem there. So prepare a short conclusion after you're done submitting your oral arguments, and don't just ask permission. Just carry on with your conclusion once you are just summing up all your arguments. What you can do is you can just prepare that summary. You can argue that summary that yes, this is what I argued. This is what my relief is in the end. There is no concept of alternative prayer or something. It actually shows a really negative impact if you are claiming something which is not really available. For example, if it's a consumer protection case, you are claiming something which is not in the jurisdiction of that redressal mechanism. So don't vouch for alternative prayers if you know that something is not going to get settled in your present case. That entirely depends on the facts of the case. So just prepare a short summary of your arguments and just state down your prayer, because there are no usual questions in the prayer.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Sir, there is another question, like how to frame the issues to be raised in the moot court competition.
Okay. Regarding this, I guess tomorrow's session is really important for you guys, because this session was only based on oral advocacy. So I guess Anant will be really happy to address this question, and he will be taking this question in great detail. So attend tomorrow's session for very important. Tomorrow's session actually centers around how you read the proposition, how you draft the issues, how you frame the issues, and how you draft the memorial. So this will be actually more importantly dealt by with Anant there. So do attend tomorrow's session. I see another question there. Since we are at home and not all of us have access to blazers, is it possible for us to wear Indian formals? If you are a female counsel, you can wear a white suit, which is very okay. And it usually happens in moot court competition and it looks really lovely. You can wear white suits there and it's totally fine. You do not even need a blazer then. And if you are a guy, you really need a blazer. You can borrow your father's blazer. You can wear any other blazer and tell the judges that, yes, I don't have a blazer because my college is shut. But do state it, because the despite being an online moot, it is still a moot court competition. And you need to wear something formal. You can wear a blue blazer. That is fine. Just tell them, because in international moots, in international arbitration moots, we wear gray, we wear blue. I've been wearing them. It's totally fine. You do not even need to wear a black tie. But in national moods such as this, you need to wear a black blazer. If there is no blazer available, you can wear a blue blazer. That's totally fine.
Okay, thank you, sir. Sir, one of the student asked, like, is it fine to argue even without one case law?
Yeah, it's totally fine, as I already suggested. But substantiating your arguments with case laws ensures you brownie points. If you do not have case laws, this means that you need to research on the proposition once again very thoroughly, because there are many case laws. There are many precedents in this present case. There are landmark judgments by the Supreme Court as well. This is my tip here. There are many cases. The case is very settled here. Please research again, because there are precedents.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, Mauladari is raising his hand and unmuting. Yeah, you can ask your question.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you can ask.
Hello, sir. Thanks for the session. It's very helpful. So I just have a small doubt. So we are away from the college, and then I've left most of my very required materials in college itself. And it is not possible for us to access blazers and formal attires from college, and we can't even go out. Since I'm in Chennai, it's a very the virus has affected Chennai the most. So is there anything that we can do about it? Can we wear Indian formals?
You can wear Indian formals, as I already said. You can wear a suit if you have it. You can wear a kurti. It is very much okay. Ensure it is a white one. If you still don't have a white one, Hina, is Hina here?
Yeah, tell me.
Yeah, Hina, what you can do is you can actually tell those judges, tell every judge that yes, there is issue with regard to the formal wear. And if you can relax everything down, I guess the participants would be at ease.
Yeah, absolutely. It will be conveyed to the judges.
Also, there is one more question here. Can you tell me about how the virtual moot court competition is done? Please read the rule book, because despite not being a participant, I've actually read the rule book. And the posters are very beautifully made by Law Internships. Please read the rule book. it is already stated how the virtual moot is going to get conducted.
Thank you so much, Tushar.
Any other questions?
Sir, there is one question by Sangeeta. She's asking, how is virtual moot court competition progressed?
Yeah, I just answered that question, and just read the
Okay.
rule book. Everything is there in the rule book there.
All right. Another one question by Sangeeta. Can you tell me how virtual moot court competition is done? In the chat box, she has asked.
This
Is
is
that
the
answer
same
too?
question. This is the same question.
Okay. So if anyone has a question, then you can raise your hand.
I'll just answer this question just for the sake of brevity. In online moots and a virtual moot court competition, what you need to do is there is just one slight difference between online and just the offline moots. There is just no way to stand here. There is no actual formality here. You can sit down very comfortably and you can argue. So I don't think there is any other problem. The entire process is same as we conduct the moots. The oral pleadings start with the jurisdiction of the case, the facts of the case. Then you move down to your arguments. I guess entirely everything is same. Just follow the rule book. I got another question. Do you follow any book for mooting? No, I don't follow any book for mooting, and I won't suggest you to follow any books for mooting because the webinars and workshops are conducted based on our prior experiences and not just theory. If there are particular lectures that you attend in your college, which is based on mooting, do attend them, because mooting is just based on practical experiences. That's how you do them. There's no book I can suggest on mooting. Gautami, there is a question on the memorial submission date.
Yes, Hina ma'am already answered. The submission is on 19th.
All right. Any other questions?
I believe there is no more questions. If you have, then you can raise your hand or ask in the chat box.
Gautami, there is a question. It states how to precisely state the facts of the case.
Okay, good question. See, the moot proposition is only of 2 pages, 2 to 3 pages, I guess. You must have actually incorporated the facts of the case in the moot court memorial, maximum of 1 page. What you need to actually do is, if you are arguing from the side of the petitioner, you need to only state down the cases which are in your favor. This is a very good question. If you are the respondents, you need to actually state down the facts of the case which are in your favor. That's how you actually state down the facts of the case and come down to the very first point that I told you, the case theory part, where you actually present your opening statement that this is what I'm going to argue. This is my factual matrix, and these are the arguments that I'm going to argue upon. You need to actually mix that opening statement in your facts of the case. There is no need to actually state down the facts of the case separately, or you can do the facts of the case separately and just include the opening statement there. You need to only cut down the facts, draft a short summary of the facts, even if it's just mark your timer, use a stopwatch, recite those facts in just 2 minutes. It shouldn't be longer than 1 or 2 minutes, the facts of the case, and it should be entirely in your favor. Just distinguish the facts in your favor, in the other side's favor, and argue only those facts when you're representing that side. This saves you time. Can we quote a case in our oral argument which is not put in our memorial? Can we quote a case in our oral argument? No, you ideally should not, and it is a wrong practice to do, but I wouldn't suggest you actually to do it, but people generally do it. So the judges are not really aware. Honestly speaking, the judges are not really aware, but it could be a human error. It could be something that you later on researched and found out, and it is really important. You can honestly tell the bench that it is not present in the memorial, but it is present in the compendium. Do include that in the compendium, because in the end, when you are going down to your oral arguments in the moot court round, you would have your compendium ready. By that time, you can also argue a case which is not in a memorial, but include that in your compendium and tell the judges explicitly that it is not in the memorial. This is a good practice, because if you are arguing in front of me uh, in this moot only, I know the cases there which are listed. And if it is not in the memorial, the marks could be cut. But in the end, this is not a strict rule, but it's a good practice so that you are also very formal in your approach. When there's a sense of ambiguity in the facts of the case, how do we argue with making any assumptions? There are no assumptions to be made on a factual matrix. You need to actually argue what is written there. If there are loopholes, you need to actually use those loopholes to argue upon your case without making any assumptions. Yeah, that's what I mean, that the facts are very clear, very straightforward, with just some good amount of loopholes. You actually need to make yourself aware with those loopholes and argue upon the facts that are in your favor, because the problem is a slightly balanced problem. There are facts in both in favor of the petitioner as well as the respondent. So you can use those facts in that case. There is no case of assumptions. If there is any particular assumption in the moot proposition, you can ask me. Any other questions?
Sir, there is one question. Does it show that you are not prepared when you plead ignorance, when you are not aware of a case not used by me that a judge is asking you about? Like he's asking basically, like we are not aware of something, like the judge is asking, like contradictory. Yeah. So how to deal with such questions during the grilling round?
Pleading your ignorance does not actually cut you marks if there are good judges there, because we are experienced judges, and the experienced judges have argued in moot court competitions. They know that sometimes the cases are not there in the factual matrix, the cases are not entirely in your favor, and sometimes you don't generally have a case based on your research. It is totally okay to plead ignorance, but not more than once or twice, because it then entirely shows that your research is not prompt. But it is okay to plead ignorance sometimes and be courteous of this fact that, your lordship, there is no case law to support my argument, but yes, there are facts involved. The facts are tilted here. This is the fact, and this is what I'm going to argue. This is the law.
Sir, there is another question by Priyam Agarwal. Should we only quote the cases whose facts are relevant with the case, or it is only valid with the law when we cite it?
Ideally, you should find precedents in this proposition. There are precedents existing, as I already said, but no, it is not. It is not actually compulsory to, argue only those cases which have the facts similar as yours. You cannot generally find precedents in various moot propositions, but in this case, there are 3, 4. So you should find those cases very well.
I think someone is raising her hand. You can ask your question. Yes, Mauladhari, I have unmuted you. You can now ask your question. I think she has some connection problem. Is there any other questions? Then you can raise your hand.
I guess that's about it.
Yeah, even I cannot see any questions, sir.
Right, then we'll conclude the session if it's all
All
right.
right. So thank you everyone for joining us. I, Gautami Chakravarti, on behalf of Team Law Internships, would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to Mr. Tushar sir for taking out time from his busy schedule and interacting with us, with all the young minds. It was truly an enriching experience, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the invite, and I thank the entire team of Law Internships. Thank you, Gautami, for being a wonderful moderator, and Hina for being there.
Sir.
Thank you everyone for your attending, and all the best for the moot court competition. Hoping to see you all there.
Thank you so much, Tushar.
All right, bye-bye.
Yeah, okay, bye. Take care.